Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of spooky music. Coinciding really well with today being Halloween, we're going to be looking at some Alice Cooper. I know of a couple of his most popular tracks, but the ones that y'all have given me to react to have been some deep cuts, I think, that haven't really resonated too well with me in the past. I'm kind of hoping today changes that. We're going to be looking at the track Black Juju from Love It to Death. That's the wrong album, but I'll fix that in a second. Let's dive in and see what Alice Cooper is bringing to the table today. Interesting. After bringing the sound in, we rolled off the treble elements of the drums. A fade in of a fade in. We faded in the drums, now we fade in the organ. That's an interesting turn.
Touched by the toil and plunged into its own. Cursed
Very funky.
through eyes overlong. A melody black flowed out of my breath. Searching
Of the little bass lick.
but bodies need rest.
Fun contrast between the lighter section we were just in and the very full section right here.
Under the soil, now waiting for worms. All that I feel is all that I've learned. All that I know is all that I think. Dead feelings are cool, but down low or I sink.
interesting bringing in the same drum pattern from the intro on the bass, is that? No, the guitar.
Bodies need rest. We all need our rest. Sleep and easy sleep. Rest. Rest. Bodies need their rest. All need our rest. Sleep and easy sleep. Rest. Rest.
It's with the clock.
But come back in the morning.
There's a lot of really harsh palm muted stuff going on in the last 40 seconds or so. It's still right here too. Those little chirpy guitar hits.
Come back hard.
Well, that was interesting. The guitar and the organ, the constant descending lines. This is getting a little repetitive over here, but I like the solo. The drum work's fun. Accelerando, alright.
Black Juju.
All right. There's some neat ideas in here. There's some ideas that kind of bounce off of me a bit, and there's some other ideas that just have me questioning why. And I think the ending is the main thing that I picked up on this song is that bodies need rest. The ending of the song then becoming exceptionally energetic, very fast paced. I'm not sure how that works with the first 7 minutes worth of music in here. It's a neat ending musically, but it kind of is at odds thematically. Though maybe there are some lyrics that I missed that would allude to why we're doing that, and when I do the lyrical dive later, I'm hopefully going to find something that justifies the ending from a thematic perspective more so than a musical one. That is, I think, the one part that just kind of has me a little confused. I thought generally there was a nice cohesion throughout the track. The ending comes out of nowhere, does its own thing. But generally, I kind of enjoyed the song. It has a nice, laid back funkiness to it during the verses. The chorus is a bit more high energy. I think it feels great as a contrast, moving between a lower energy and higher energy style. I think that works rather well. The bridge, well, we'll get to the bridge eventually. It's different from everything else. And then we have the outro, which brings back some of the beginning ideas and expands upon them with the guitar solo into the accelerando as the climax to the ending. It generally works. There's a lot of really cool parts in it. I dig the bass work all over the place. I dig the guitar and organ stuff going on. The vocals are interesting. They kind of run against what the music's doing, but in a way that I think adds to the overall vibe. And the drum work is fun throughout. From a very casual perspective, I enjoyed this track. But this isn't casual reactions, is it? This is critical reactions. Let's dig into the song and find out what's actually going on, what works, what doesn't work, and what the song is trying to say or do with its 9-minute runtime. Now, to start, there's like a 2-minute intro to the song. Geez, I don't know how to feel about this yet. I don't think it felt too long in the moment. But I don't think that it's going to feel well paced on multiple listens. For me personally, that's a subjective thing right there. That's my opinion. Particularly because we have 2 minutes of this drum crescendo. There's two drum patterns here, one left pan, one right pan. The left pan is louder for a majority of this. I didn't even hear the right pan until 30 to 35 seconds in when it began to faintly show up in the mix. As this rises, it eventually hits a peak about a minute into the song, and the the treble side of these drums is eventually pulled down until we only have really the bassiness of these drums. I found this to be an odd choice. I wonder if the treble is used to punch through the silence during the crescendo, but they didn't want it to compete with the guitars or the organ eventually. I thought it was just really weird to re-EQ the drums after we've already adjusted to their sound, although the EQing was done over a period of time, which helped adjust to the new sound of them also. It just felt kind of strange, but once we established this rhythm, we have a double fade in. We have another instrument start from nothing and come in. It's the organ, and it's giving us our chord progression. It takes us a full 2 minutes over 20% of this song to get done with the intro and get into a section of the track. Now, I'm not somebody who immediately shies away from long songs. 9 minutes isn't even really a lengthy track compared to some of the stuff that we have listened to on the channel. It's not a competition. I believe that every song should be the length that it needs to be, and I'm going to call out songs that are paced poorly, whether they are too short or too long. I don't know how I feel about this opening. It doesn't do anything, but I don't really think that it was too long either. As I mentioned, it felt fine in the moment. The 2 minutes passed a lot quicker than I think other songs, lengthy intros or slow burns have passed. But as I mentioned, I don't knowing what it does and that it kind of doesn't do anything for those 2 minutes. We have two crescendos and that's the only movement we have. I don't know that it would be an intro that I am as receptive to on other listens. As it was here, I was kind of wondering what comes next. The volume keeps increasing. I heard something new over here, that second drum part coming in, the organ. I was curious where everything was going. I was along for that ride, but knowing where it goes, I don't know if I'd be along for it again. Maybe I would tighten it up just a little bit, cut the crescendos down in half. I don't think the volume rises need to be that slow. We can retain the feeling of it without making it as long as it is. But I'm sure fans of Alice Cooper, fans of Black Juju are going to say it's perfect, and that's why we're all correct. We all have our opinions. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. The intro aside, though, we get into the meat of the song, the A section. High energy. We got Alice just singing very loudly the word bodies, if I remember correctly. We have loud guitar work. We have moving bass lines. We have loud organ work. The drums are going wild. Big moment right here. It kind of works. The crescendo's moving into something as large as this. It's why I wouldn't change too much about the intro, just kind of cut down the length of the crescendos, not even the extremes. Keep it from 0 to 100 as we have, just don't take as long to get through it, I suppose, because the crescendo into this big moment works really well. And I think that having this moment as large as it is, and then cutting back down to that very funky B section is a very neat contrast as well. We kind of rein in a lot of the larger sounds. We reduce the volume by about 5 decibels is what I saw. On top of that, the bass moves to these shorter staccato notes, playing less of them, allowing more space and rest in their idea. We hyper focus on rhythm away from atmosphere or chord progressions. That's not to say we don't still have chord progressions. We're not just holding out these chords anymore, though. It's introduced in a rhythmically syncopated way in order to create something that feels lighter, smoother, and funner. I really like this, moving away from the loud shoutiness that Alice started with. We kind of move into something a bit more comfortable in range, in volume, in delivery. Everything about this feels very chill and laid back. It's a massive shift from that big A section and then moving back into that big moment. Again, the punch of that, the impact of the contrast works really well. I'm a big fan of the dynamics of this. Already, we've started out with layering dynamics, with volume dynamics, with intensity dynamics. It is a very cool song, and we are only 4 minutes into it. But after this is the bridge. We get about 8 bars maybe of a new bass and guitar idea that fade out into nothing. I'm not really too sure about those 8 bars. I wish they would have been expanded into something. It felt like they were leading into a cool idea. Sort of like the foundation for a neat melody to be played over or something like that. There's a neat rhythm to it that I was hoping the drums might have expanded upon. And instead we took this twist and then just put an end of road sign at the end of it. I was hoping it would take me to the next city, and come to find out it's just a dead end. I was a bit disappointed with that. This doesn't really help my understanding or engagement with the bridge, which was little chirpy sounds from the guitar, very tightly palm muted stuff, just really getting the initial hit and zero reverb after that, from each of these notes. Alice doing spoken word stuff, but like super quiet. And I just got done talking about the dynamics. I do like the fact that this is even quieter than the funky section. That in itself is cool. Once again, very wide dynamic range on this track, but it's almost too quiet. And it doesn't help that there's very little going on either. It's not even just that you can't hear it, it's literally not being played. There's sparse guitar work and then the vocals, and that is it. And the vocals are a bit sparse on their own too. This ends up taking a large part of the middle of the song, is nothing. Now, you can blame it on me just having a short attention span, or me being a young millennial. I'm an older millennial, but I'm probably young to a lot of Alice Cooper fans. But I mean, I got gray hair. I'm not a young kid. But this middle section I have the same issue with it as I do the intro. It just does nothing for such a long amount of time. That isn't to say that nothing is going on. Much like the intro having a crescendo, there are words being said here. There are musical ideas coming from the guitar. It's not that it's nothing. It just isn't doing anything with what little it has going on. It's not pointing towards anywhere. It's not expanding on anything. I'd even honestly say it's not exploring much of what it is. It is simply a low point of the song that keeps going. I am not afraid of silence in music. I'm not afraid of quiet in music. But there's just nothing for me to engage with here. What I hear in the first 5 seconds is the same thing that I'm going to hear a minute in and a minute and a half in. While things do expand, the guitar ends up playing more notes over time. The notes themselves, the pitches, aren't really forming into anything that is melodically coherent, nothing that's consonant in harmony. It almost seems to be randomly placed rhythmically and pitch-wise for a little bit of time here. It just kind of ends up being nonsense. Does that mean it's a bad part of the song? No, I don't think so. Silence, quiet, brevity, minimalism, these are all tools in a composer's toolbox. They're not ones to be shied away from, even though in modern music we tend to just not have much of any of that at all. But using them isn't bad. As usual, it's about using the right tool for the right time. And I like the intention here. As I mentioned, the idea of bringing the song even further down, of exploring an emptiness, spoken word. I like these things on paper. I'm just not a big fan of the execution in particular. But I don't know what I would have done different. Not without drastically changing it. I think we can still achieve a quiet minimalism without going towards this basically nothing, a bareness to the music. But having, if I would replace this with something a bit more, it's still going to be busier by some metric. There's going to be something that I can personally latch on to and engage with, which is not what Alice Cooper had intended. So I would be making a very different song in that regard. Would it be better? Subjectively, I would probably like it better. I might be a bit biased because I'd be the one making the changes. But objectively, I mean, there's no way to say that. It wouldn't be better, it'd be different. But like I said, I like the vision. I'm just not a big fan of the execution here on this bridge. It is unique though. There's very few things outside of classical really that would engage with such a wide contrast in volume and in layering, moving from something rather large to something hyper minimalistic. I give Alice credit where credit's due. Not many people would do something wild like that, and he's got the guts to try it. I'm sure Alice Cooper fans loved it. So it's not like it's a huge mistake across the board where everybody says, no, that's just dumb. But it is something that I think is going to be divisive. And I'm just not a big fan of that moment. That takes us to the crescendo back into our A and B section again to wrap the song up before going into the guitar solo. The guitar solo idea in and of itself I think is fine. As I mentioned, the crescendo and accelerando, more specifically the speeding up of the song over the ending, I think works well. Taking all of that energy that we had and then dissipated, building it back up in volume and then building it back up in speed to hit a really high point to finish the song up. I think that works on paper. Again, thematically, not sure about it. We'll figure that out in a little bit. But I want to focus on the two main elements here, which is the guitar solo and the organ. I hated the organ here. A cool idea on paper, a single one-bar phrase that sits underneath as foundation for the melody that's being played. This is jazz music 101. You got the bass walking, the drum doing rhythm, and your keyboard is playing, or your pianist playing a short idea in order to just sort of vamp underneath the guitar, because your bass is giving you their harmonic information. So your piano doesn't have to play chords. They don't have to play the chord progression exclusively. So they get a little unique thing, a little ditty to play underneath the solo. Like I said, Jazz 101 right here. But the organ ends up playing a super repetitive single bar phrase that also has a lot of prominence in the mix and ends up focusing on just one key note that ends up feeling like an alarm in my head, the same tone over and over, continuing to hit it, move away from it, come back to it, move away from it, and really accenting this note in this rhythmic pattern, and to a point where that's all I can hear, and it dominates the song for me in a negative way. It becomes nails on a chalkboard for me, and I can't ignore it. It's taking over everything in the mix. It's a little bit of needing a little bit more variety in that lick, even expanding it out maybe to a second bar. Having a 2-bar phrase instead of a 1-bar phrase I think would work a lot, but maybe even just pulling the accent off of that note, that pitch every once in a while could create some contrast in it that removes the emphasis on it. But I think honestly, it's a volume thing too. The organ is too loud to be a supporting idea underneath the guitar. If it was doing counterpoint, if it was doing a 4-bar phrase, that I think would be a different story. But being something so short and concise and looped does not deserve to be the same volume level as the key instrument here, the one delivering the melody. And so a little bit of variety plus a different mix on it I think would really improve what's going on there. But then again, maybe the alarm effect is supposed to be what it's going for. Maybe it's supposed to be a section that feels eerie or alarming, something that's supposed to indicate an element of danger to it, because the song doesn't really go in that direction, but it's also difficult to judge 70s musical tropes to modern musical tropes. Maybe this might have felt very edgy and daring at the time, whereas now it's very soft and rounded off on the edges, not because the song has changed, but because listeners' perception of music and musical tropes and themes have changed. But again, maybe that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be an alarming moment. If so, great execution. I still hate it though. But listening to the guitar off on the left, I enjoy what it's doing. It's got some cool little licks in there. Interestingly though, during the accelerando, it gets out of time quite a few places with the drums. And I'm not a huge fan of that. It doesn't disrupt the song in any way, but I immediately noticed, like, oh, you rushed that a little bit, which, they're speeding up. It's an accelerando. That's the natural thing to do. Most people don't drag during accelerandos. They definitely rush sections. But, I kind of wish that it was different, though, right? Like, today you would just do another take of it, but back then, what was this, 71? Yeah, I mean, the whole band would have had to retake it, right? And maybe they do have other takes of this post this take, and this was still the best one they liked. I mean, it's just a different thing. You're going to expect mistakes on earlier recordings like this just because the financial and time investment of doing another take was so much higher than today. And splicing together takes was possible, but not something everybody wanted to do back then. You're literally cutting and taping tape together rather than using a keyboard to just manipulate some graphics in a program. Um, so I'm more lenient about issues, but I still wanted to point it out. I think it was an interesting thing that was the take they went with. The drummer hits some interesting notes in here too. I don't know if they're mistakes or just eccentric rhythms in this ending, but it ends up working well, creating a chaotic layer on top of this ramping up of speed, which can feel like a loss of control and slightly chaotic just in its initial intentions. So ultimately, I think the whole ending works well, even if there's some parts of it that didn't quite click with me. With all of that said, we have a song that is kind of all over the place. Um, we have some interesting drum work at the beginning that we don't really revisit much. The rock style drums and sort of some jazzier, lighter, funkier drums pick up. We have those rhythms that get shifted. The song moves from these really big moments to really light and to basically non-existent at other times, and then we have a massive accelerando at the end. It all comes together in a way, but there's also a lot of decisions in here that I think kind of segregate the song into moments that feel a little disjointed from those around it. I'm going to read some lyrics here, see what's going on there, see if we can't tie all of this together into maybe a thematic or artistic whole. So, this is a song about somebody who commits suicide and then comes back as a zombie? Am I reading this right? Verse 1 says, touched by the toil and plunged into his arm, cursed through the night through eyes of alarm, a melody black flowed out of my breath, searching for death, but bodies need rest. So he put something into his arm that made him feel panic and had a black melody flowing out of his breath. It changed the way that he spoke. I'm assuming drugs here. And he was searching for death, though. I think the concept there is that he wasn't wanting suicide, or he was wanting to commit suicide, right? The chorus is just the word body over and over. Then verse 2 says, under the soil now, waiting for worms. So he died, right? It says, all that I feared is all that I've learned, and all that I know is all that I think. This idea that he only knows fear and it's all he can think about, which might have been why his life was not great and he turned to suicide, because all he could ever think about was being in constant fear. Then we have the bridge, though. The spoken word section says, bodies need rest. We all need our rest. Sleep and easy sleep, rest. Bodies need their rest. We all need our rest. Sleep and easy sleep, rest. But come back in the morning. Come back hard. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Verse 3 says, clutching and biting, my soul has caught on fire. My evil is now, and I'm caught up in desire. Everything I'm living for is all that I am. Liking it and loving it, that's all in the plan. Interestingly, the chorus has shifted from the word body to bodies, the plural. And then the final word that Alice Cooper whispers is Black Juju, the name of the song. Now, I'm a little rusty on this vocabulary, but juju is definitely not a word we use too often anymore. If I had to make a guess, I would say it's not very politically correct. But particularly even black juju, I think, would have described back in the 70s and maybe parts of the 80s an African type of shamanic ritual, magic. And even the word zombie, I believe, is an African word, if I remember correctly. I might be a little off on that. So this song, I think, is definitely dated a little bit just by its vocabulary. But being that at the time, Black Juju probably would have spoken about these rituals of raising from the dead and other types of shamanistic ritual, particularly dating to or pointing towards African culture. I don't think that it's odd that the song is about somebody dying and coming back from the dead and enjoying life now. I think that's the interesting part more than anything else, and what deviates quite a bit from our more modern idea of a zombie. I'm trying to think of when, like, Night of the Living Dead, was that the first one, came out? I know it was the 70s, but I think it would have been after this, and that would have been the beginning of the modern idea of what a zombie is. So this zombie not coming back for brains, but just full of evil and desire and loving life, I think is an interesting direction. Because, you know, being born much after this came out, much longer after the modern idea of what a zombie is was put into Western pop culture, I've never really thought about what a zombie might be prior to that. Somebody raised up from the dead. It's so common to just be zombies. Zombies are such a big part of Western pop culture. And it's all the brain eating zombies. And it's really interesting, again, to see this sort of perspective pre possibly Night of the Living Dead of what somebody raised from the dead would want to do. That's kind of cool. And I guess that's where the accelerando comes in, is that what once was dull and dreary life that he hated ended up turning into something that he loved. Gave him energy and something to live for in a fun sense since he was dead. The energy of that and hyper contrasting that against the beginning of the song and its, laid back slowness. There is one annotation on this from Genius. It says the song is about black magic and dead bodies, unusual subjects in 1971. I think that's pretty neat too. Not only does it sort of predate my idea and the pop culture zeitgeist of what zombies are, but it also might even predate a lot of this specific concept, the topic itself in music at the time. Kind of being a bit forward thinking because, once again, this is just common stuff to hear about in metal. Black magic, the occult, any sort of thing in this realm, I kind of take it for granted. And it's quite possible Alice might have been on the forefront of bringing this in. And it wouldn't surprise me then if maybe this song was a bit controversial. Depending on how big Alice Cooper was at this time, how many parents probably were, found out their kids listened to it and they're like, no, we need to get this off the streets. And I don't know, man. Times are weird back then. Times are weird now. What am I saying? Anyways, gone on way too long with this. These are my thoughts. Alice Cooper's Black Juju. Let me know what you thought of this. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on, just add your own opinion or perspective to the conversation. Any of that, toss it down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as we wrap up this week's spooky theme. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.